Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 20th, 2024. It has been 3,797 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 121 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 118 days since Russia expanded its war aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Wednesday and Thursday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Our early assessment that Russia would carry out a missile attack this week targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure was regrettably accurate. 2. In our assessment, Russia has started a second offensive with new operational goals. 3. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 4. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 5. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022. As outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March the 5th. 6. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 7. Autocrat Putin is continuing the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 8. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Last night, Russia carried out a missile and drone attack, including 4 Kh-101 or 555 cruise missiles launched by 295 MS strategic bombers, 3 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles launched from the Voronezh region of Russia, 2 Kh-59 air-to-surface guided missiles launched from tactical aviation, and 27 Shahed-136 one-way drones. A Kh-59 was shot down, as well as all of the Kh-101s and Shahed UAVs. The United States Air Force deployed a KC-135 Strata tanker, which orbited over central Poland before returning to base. The attacks targeted Ukraine's electrical infrastructure, causing critical damage to facilities in the Vinnytsia, Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk and Kyiv oblasts. 3 men aged 30 to 63 were wounded in the Kryvyi Rih, with 2 in hospital. The TEC reported that a thermal power plant suffered a direct hit, causing serious damage. 3 engineers were in hospital in critical condition. Damage to, quote, critical infrastructure in the Vinnytsia region was caused by falling debris. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombed the village of Vilhivka in the Kharkiv Oblast. 1 person was killed and another wounded. Russia also attacked the settlement of Novoosinovo, wounding 2 women who are both in hospital. 3 UMPK glide bombs struck the city of Kharkiv, causing damage at a children's camp, with no reports of injuries. In the Donetsk Oblast, a Russian attack on Kurakhivka damaged 6 homes, with 1 civilian killed and another wounded. As part of offensive operations near New York and Druzhba, Russia heavily shelled Toretsk. A 76-year-old woman suffered shrapnel wounds and broken bones when an artillery shell struck the porch of her home. The village of Roskishne was hit by a Smerch rocket, killing a 63-year-old man. The VKS also bombed Zalizne, injuring one civilian. Russian artillery struck the Dnipro district of the city of Kherson, wounding 2 civilians. Both were transported to the hospital with shrapnel wounds and closed head injuries. Here is today's action report. Russia carried out 129 assaults on Tuesday and at least 122 through Wednesday evening. Through June the 18th, the 7-day moving average increased to 122, signaling the start of a second summer offensive. Russian commanders continue to concentrate their combat power west of Avdiivka, and significant attacks continue east of Chasiv Yar and within Krasnogorivka. There has been a sharp increase in fighting south and east of New York and Donetsk, signaling this is a new operational goal and an increase in the number and intensity of attacks in the Kupiansk area of operation, OREO. The Kremlin appears to have deprioritized the left bank of the Konka and Dnipro rivers in the Kherson Oblast, the Zaporizhia region, and the Liptsy-Vovchansk AO, where Russian troops remain on the defensive. Now let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsy-Vovchansk area of operation, OREO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk with no significant change in the situation. Russian troops at the machine aggregate plant remain surrounded. Yuri Povkh, spokesman for the Kharkiv Operational Strategic Group, said that the number of encircled Russian troops, quote, are not hundreds but dozens. Ukrainian forces continue to make slow progress in Hlyboka and Lukyantsy, where house-to-house fighting continues. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces carried out 11 attacks in the direction of Sinkivka, Stepova-Novoselivka, Pishane from Krokhmalne, and in the direction of Krugliakivka. None of the attacks were successful. In the Svatovo AO of the Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts, Russian forces continued their attacks in the direction of Grekivka from occupied Novovodane without success. A geolocated video showed a Russian Iskander-K ballistic cruise missile hit the earthen bridge across the Oskil River at Horokhovatka, causing moderate damage. Quick assessment. The strike indicates that Russian forces are setting conditions for a possible offensive in the direction of Borova from occupied Raihorodka. In the Crimea AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russia carried out attacks in the direction of Makiyivka, Nevske, Terny, and in the Serebryanka woods. There was no change in territorial control. In occupied Pervomaisk, a Russian truck carrying ammunition caught fire and exploded. There was no information on what caused the fire. A Russian propagandist toured occupied Toshkivka 25 months after Russian forces captured the settlement. The video showed that no work has been done to remove the debris of destroyed buildings. Quote, "They have nothing here, no shops, no pharmacies, no internet, no water, no electricity. We talk to the local residents, they have lots of problems. People are asking for electricity. They are very sad because they were forgotten. All multi-story buildings were destroyed. The problem here is not the building materials. The problem is that there is no one to build it. There are no people left here. There are also no men here. They are mobilized." This picture is typical for long-occupied territories. And I want to address those who still believe that Land for Peace plan is viable. This war is not for land. This war is for people. Russians are poisoned with existential hatred toward Ukrainians to the point they can't allow the very existence of our nation. They kill our warriors on the battlefield and our civilians in their homes. Their goal is to get rid of all things Ukrainian, and it applies to occupied territories too, as Russians are not there to protect, as they claim, Russian nationals, who, by the way, are not so Russian after all. The enemy occupies land not to use its resources, but to make it easier to kill Ukrainians, to grind everything that remains, and to turn it into wasteland. As barren void instead of Ukraine is a Russian dream. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces continued their attacks in the Siverskoye with attempts to advance toward Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka and into the village of Rozdolivka, ending in failure. In the Konstantinivka, there were no changes to the line of conflict. Ukrainian sources reported fighting in the area of Bogdanivka. Russian forces were able to enter the village of Kalinivka with armored vehicles almost reaching the eastern edge of the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, before being repulsed by artillery, drones and anti-tank weapons. A Russian MTLB may have been a vehicle-borne IED, with the video capturing it exploding with enough force to obliterate the surrounding buildings. We'll link to the video in our almost daily situation reports. There's more information in the podcast description. Fighting continued on the eastern edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar and near the Novy microdistrict, with no change in the situation. Russian attempts to advance into the western edge of Ivanivske, back into Klishivka and in the direction of Andriivka were unsuccessful. In the Toretsk-New York AO, Russian forces were able to advance up to 2,000 meters in the direction of Druzhba using the railroad grade. Ukrainian forces are pushing back, recovering 800 to 1,000 meters in the direction of Mayorsk. The war map was updated to show the new Russian advance. Fighting continued east of Pivnichne with no changes to the situation. Russian mercenary mill blogger Wogonzo gave a surprisingly grim assessment, writing, quote, "The front intensified in the New York area, where the Russian armed forces attacked Ukrainian positions on a wide front line in order to push the line of conflict away from Horlivka. Rapid advances due to the very long static nature of the front line in this sector should not be expected." I can't believe it. No lies detected. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, the heaviest fighting continues to be in the Avdiivka AO, where Russian forces carried out at least 43 assaults. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Alexandropol not only failed, but resulted in the loss of positions. Attacks were carried out in the direction of Kalinova, in the western part of Novo-Alexandrivka, east of Yevgenivka, the eastern edge of Sokil, the western edge of Novopokrovsk, and in the direction of Novoselivka Persha. None of the attacks were successful. Wogonzo reported that the June 18th Russian assault that reached the first buildings in Yasnobrodivka was ultimately unsuccessful, with fighting moving east of the village. However, Semyon Pegov made another claim of a successful wet crossing into eastern Karlivka without evidence. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that Russian attacks in the area of the settlement were repulsed. Russian sources reported that fighting continued near Nevelsk. The heaviest fighting in the Vuhledar AO was in Krasnohorivka, where the situation was unchanged. Fighting also continued in western Georgiivka and Paraskoviivka. There was limited fighting in the Vremivka AO. Russian forces continued their assaults on Urozhaine from the south without success. A Russian attempt to advance on Rivnopil from the area of Priyutne ended in failure. On the Sea of Azov, the fuel depot at Port Azov in the Rostov region of Russia continued to burn 3 days after being attacked by Ukraine. Local officials reported another storage tank depressurized, spreading the fire. Russia continues to add barges under the Kerch Bridge to protect against uncrewed surface vessels. Satellite images showed that 21 barges now block the approaches to the bridge. Ukraine carried out wide-scale drone attacks in western Russia, targeting energy infrastructure. multiple Ukrainian drones struck a Russian fuel depot in the settlement of Platonovka, east of Tambov, 370 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. In the settlement of Anem in the Republic of Adygea, Ukrainian drones also hit a fuel depot, sparking a major fire. Reports of a drone strike on the Afip refinery in the Krasnodar Krai were misattributed to the attack on Anem. Russian air defenses intercepted the Ukrainian drone over the city of Slavyansk na Kubani. The falling debris killed one person. Near the village of Lekshur in the Udmurt Republic, partisans destroyed railroad relay boxes, knocking out rail service for several hours. Here is my theater-wide update. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky reported that the Organization of American States, a multilateral regional body focused on human rights, electoral oversight, social and economic development, and security in the Western Hemisphere, with 32 member nations, signed the Ukraine Peace Summit communiqué. The nation of Antigua and Barbuda also signed the document. White House National Security Council advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters that Ukraine could use American weapons to strike Russian military targets anywhere within the 1991 borders if they pose a threat to Ukraine. This is a significant change in policy. Sullivan further clarified that Ukraine can use US-provided air defense systems to target any military aircraft in Russian airspace if the planes are going to attack Ukraine. Denmark announced its 19th military aid package for Ukraine, which includes additional equipment to support F-16 fighter planes. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.